Good afternoon. We're going to call the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority to order at 2:01. Let the record show for our Oregon commissioners, Commissioner Fox, Babbitt, and Polson are present. And we have alternate Thomas in the room. I cannot see online if we have Mr. DeVol or Mr. Edwards. And for the Washington side, Commissioner Anderson and Commissioner Keithler are present. Do we know, is Doug online yet? And then I don't think Seth isn't online, is he? Nope. Okay, but we have alternates Wilson and Berger. So until Commissioner Gibson shows up, Commissioner alternate Wilson is seated. Do we have any modifications to the agenda? Seeing none.
Well, maybe just procedurally, but if anticipation of the resolution about changing to Board of Direct Commissioners, do we want to hold to bring the bylaws back once that edit has already been done? Because all of that language is Board of Officers.
They have made that change, anticipating that there will be approval to change it from directors to commissioners.
So should we just flip those so that procedurally we're not doing something to change something and we haven't voted to make the change? Like do the resolution first and then we should do the bylaws.
We can do that.
Sounds like sound logic to me.
Yes. I remember Mark told us to do one thing in front of the other. It might have been it. Okay.
Yeah.
We have Commissioner Edwards on the line.
Okay. Thank you. Was there any other changes to the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor of the amended agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, we have the minutes from May 13th, 2024. Anybody see any modification? No? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes as stated.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We have the special board meeting, June 3rd, 2024. Who wants to go? I know you.
I move that we accept it as written.
Second.
Thank you for the second, sir. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next up, we have public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have anyone in the room or online who would like to provide public comment? If you're online, *6 to unmute yourself. If you're on your phone, raise your hand, turn your video on, get our attention somehow. Is there anyone who would like to provide public comment? Hearing none, I'm going to close public comment for the day. Don't worry, you'll have another option in 2 weeks. We move into the executive reports, co-chair's report. Commissioner Fox.
Just 2 items, and probably take some thunder away from Mike for just a second, but we got the biological opinion signed off. That's a major milestone for this project. And the second one is we're very close on our first tribe MOA. We believe we have a deal. It's going to their council in a month or two, and we expect we'll have our first one behind us. So that's another major milestone.
And I guess my update to add to that is I went to the Waterways Association meeting last week. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of talk about bridge strikes from the Waterways group. And our bridge was not mentioned as the highest of issues. It was actually the bridge down in Longview that has the largest issue. I think it tops the top 5 in the nation, actually. So luckily we skirted that. There was a lot of really good questions that were asked of our bridge and the design and construction and heights. And there was a lot of interest in our bridge. I think almost every person in the room had been across our bridge, and when they realized that the sufficiency rating is down to a 6, none of them wanted to go across it again. So It was a really good meeting. It was really positive and had some good meetings with some of the attendees. With that, we'll move on to our project director update.
All right, thank you. Mike, go to the big ones. We are working with staff to set up a tour and with Oregon legislative lobbyists for a September 13th, 2024 Oregon legislative tour. So more to come on that, but just mark that on your calendars. We'll send out a hold, but that will be an event that will hopefully we'll get some Oregon and maybe Washington legislators here to visit the project.
When you put it on hold, we're talking about breakfast.
Breakfast, yes, it'll be in the morning. We'll send out a hold for that. On the funding and finance, we are still working through WashDOT agreement to revise our 15 million. So we're looking to get that done this month. So we'll check back in there with them. He doesn't have any more comments. He was just finding calendar time to revise the agreement and get it back to us. So it's today or tomorrow is my day to check in with them. So Oregon funding, the SIB loan, we have sent that in and it's with DOJ, right?
I have to do one clarification and then it will be with DOJ, yes.
And then Hood River County, we have a meeting with them on Wednesday for the Hood River County loan. We're still waiting on the BIP grant. The anticipation right now is the last week of June, right before a big announcement. I guess there's some kind of announcement that Biden is planning at the end of June, and they think that he will do all the announcements for BIP right before that. So, the other one we have outstanding, other two, is raise grants. We're still waiting on FHW headquarters to finalize that grant, and then we'll be able to get started with that. We check in weekly, and we'll let you know as soon as it gets signed. The infra grant, we are continuing to work with FHWA on that grant as well. That one will be a little longer. So it's much larger grants. We did get some clarification to an email that raised some concerns about not getting access to that fund. They will actually phase the fund, so we're putting together a letter to support that with FHWA. So that concern is less than what it was. That's working, continuing. And then we just continue to meet with the other three treaty tribes. Mike told you about the one. We're continuing to meet with them in person and virtually to try to progress those. And they're taking small steps forward, but no real definitive timeline of when the other three will be completed.
I think you mentioned when it was 6.
And
Yeah,
yes, we did make progress on the section 106 environmental. There was if you remember, there was an item that Yakima Nation needed to resolve with DAP, which is the archaeology and historic preservation in Washington. That has been resolved, so that involves all the travel issues with 106. It is now back into an ODOT process. So we're working through that process. We think at the end of this year that process will get wrapped up. Section 106. That will officially close out the two, I'll call them required items for FEIS and the ROD. And then we have the secondary required items, which is the 3D MLAs. So, and we have started discussions with FHWA to allow us to start moving forward with some activities. We won't be able to start construction, but hopefully we can start some permitting and right away and other activities once we get that section 106 done. But we really can't have that conversation until we get to 106. Seems like they're open to those discussions at least. That's it.
Okay, any questions on the director's report? Hearing none. Legal report.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. So on the entity status legislation, Foster Garvey is reviewing the potential for including provisions in the recreational immunity legislation, as well as following up on the SDAO regarding liability insurance. So Foster Garvey continues to pursue that. With respect to the Oregon
Transportation Infrastructure Bank, they've committed to providing a $5 million credit facility. And Foster Garvey has also reviewed the terms of the proposed credit facility that's going to be provided by Hood River County, and they will commence negotiating the terms of that proposal. With respect to the rating agency engagement, Kroll has delivered an investment grade rating, allowing the Bridge Authority to move forward with its application for the TIFIA loan. With respect to the CDM Smith contract, I believe that's on the agenda today. Foster Garvey has completed negotiations. I'm sorry?
Keep going, Judy. Someone was accidentally off.
Oh, thank you. Foster Garvey's completed the negotiations and submitted the resolution for the board's consideration at today's meeting. With respect to the TIFIA loan, as noted above, the Bridge Authority received investment grade rating from Kroll, and Foster Garvey and the Finance Working Group will continue to work towards finalizing the letter of interest that's to be submitted to TIFIA actually today, so it should have been submitted. Maybe Mark can give us an update on that. The BNSF Railroad Agreement I see is on the consent agenda today for the board's approval. And with respect to a new matter regarding the tolling policy, Foster Garvey and the Finance Working Group prepared a presentation for the board for use in a public hearing regarding the tolling policy. That's all I have to report. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for legal? Okay, thank you very much, Judy. We just got a message. Can someone let Jim Colvin? He's in the waiting room. He's apparently not in the Ryan. It looks like he's not in the waiting room. Okay.
Some other.
Yeah. Waiting in the wrong room. Okay, moving on. Lobbyist report. We won't start with Jim Cole since he's not in the waiting room. Who else do we have other than, do we have our state? Brad, there you are.
Hey guys, currently working, as was mentioned earlier, we are targeting the 13th to see if we can get some Washington participation in that Oregon, I guess it's JTC event, if that's the term for Oregon. We'll be working, I think we're going to try and see if we can get folks to come down the night before and maybe either do a dinner or at least have them in town if it's going to be a breakfast meeting, but we're beginning to work on that. We've done some of the outreach to all of the local legislators in both the 14th and the 17th. We will also, as soon as the primary is over, which in Washington is early August, we will be doing outreach also to all of the candidates who make it through the primary, again, to do more of a briefing on the project. And that's going to be occurring during kind of the mid to late October. And all those things, as well as we continue to do, be working to engage with legislators as well as stakeholders in the broader, any broader effort around a transportation package, which is going to be kind of our key, sort of the key tool by which, if we're going to increase the funding, it's going to be as part of a broader transportation package. All of those things are continuing to move forward. So I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions if folks have any.
Any questions for Brad? Okay, thank you very much, Brad. Do we have anyone from Oregon online?
Is Maddie on?
Mm.
Okay, so Thorn Run had a change in staff this month. So Katie is no longer with Thorn Run, who's been on the calls and meetings for the last couple of years. Maddie, who also works with co-worker with her, is taking over our project. So we'll get her up to speed. She's getting up to speed and understanding the project, and we'll make sure she's on these going forward. So
Well, you probably know there was a bunch of us down in Salem last week. Grant, were you going to talk about that?
Go ahead.
Okay. It was Grant, and his second, I guess, first in command, his daughter was with us. And it was, the three of us, Mike, Jake and myself, were down there for the whole day. We met with a bunch of, representatives and their staffs. And, I think kind of a theme that I heard is that there's a lot of support for us, but we're not their first priority. And I think somehow we're never going to be their first priority, but we got to get up higher on their acknowledgement scale. And I think throughout the rest of this year, we need to be working with Maddie and figuring out a program to engage our local citizens into an effort to increase our visibility down there and the importance of us. They did say that, they're talking about a transportation bill next year, but it may or may not happen. And there's also an effort underway right now to establish a program just for us to fund 105 million in case there is a transportation bill that goes through. But I still think we've got to get our citizens on both sides of the river to start making phone calls and helping out.
We did reach out. We're doing a letter of support campaign through Thorn Run. Just the general support of us being a part of a package or our standalone bill. So those emails were all sent out to the local regional folks that we'd always contact on that. So the cities, counties, One Gorge. There was also, and I'll bring you more details to this, but the One Gorge, there's been a very early conversation with them about maybe doing a combined effort with them for the September 13th in order to just draw a little more attention to the event. So we'll need to further that conversation. We'll do that through the Communications Government Relations Group, but I just need to talk through that, what that would look like.
The only thing I could add is that Oregon, like Washington, is facing a lot of bird maintenance when it comes to transportation projects. And so the state of Oregon and their DOT is looking at their transportation packages more of a maintenance rather than let's do projects. So we've got a few hurdles to overcome. So it's gonna be an all hands on deck in order to get this one over the finish line in Oregon.
And especially since this bridge is off ODOT system, it's not related to ODOT in any way, shape, or form. It's separate. And ODOT's funding mechanisms have historically not been tied to inflation or anything else. So they're in a bit of a funding crunch as is. So they have a few hurdles to overcome separate from even us trying to get funding.
In terms of major priority, there's the effort to figure out a long-term funding mechanism for ODOT, which has been going on for a couple of years now. And it easily could be that winds up bumping a transportation package for a couple of years. The transportation packages are not that regular in Oregon. I don't know about Washington, but they're not that regular. And if it happened this year, it would be one of the quickest turnarounds for a transportation package. So we shouldn't be surprised if we have to go the path of trying to separate it from that. I will be in Salem next week for the Association of Oregon Counties Board meeting. And so I'll probably run some legislators there. Is there any, not enough to discuss here, but if anyone has any follow-up that you'd like me to do, make sure that I get it before Friday.
I think we need to show you what we showed them last week, so you know what's out there.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right, federal, Ryan.
Hello. Sorry, it's me. Jim is having some technical difficulties. I believe he's stuck in a waiting room or potentially on an outdated version of this meeting invite. But I know I'll probably sound like a broken record, but we're still in a holding pattern on bridge investment. Jim said he expects that decision by the second week of July. And as I'm sure you guys have heard, we are currently underway for fiscal year 25 appropriations. I know that fiscal year 24 earmarks have not been conferred yet. They're still stuck in FHWA right now. Those usually take 3 months at the agency level. We're approaching that 3-month deadline. So hopefully you guys will hear something for that soon. But sorry, I interrupted myself. I was talking about fiscal year 25. The fiscal year 25 bill text for transportation, housing and infrastructure should be released in the next couple weeks. And yeah, that is all I have. Let me know if you guys have any questions.
Any questions for Ryan? All right, thank you.
We have 25 earmark requests that we're putting in.
The
No, I
guidance
just wanted to
that
give you an update on that.
I was gonna say the guidance that we've received is that with us just getting $4 million from each state, there's very little opportunity to, get any additional.
But if we don't ask, we have zero chance.
You can ask.
Windows closed.
Yeah,
All
so.
the offices for.
We weren't going to ask because usually they say you don't get it multiple years in a row, especially we were at the top end of the scale on what you usually get through GDS requests. And so our partners, we need to leave some space for our local community partners to get some too, so.
It helps to play nice.
All right.
Well, every dollar counts. It means it's the same for our two partners. Meaning we can lead into our partner updates. Do we have anyone from Federal Highways, ODOT, WashDOT, or other stakeholders that would like to give us an update? I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand. Okay, we will move on. Has everyone had a chance to review the consent agenda? And if so, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second to approve the consent agenda? I'm hoping you were planning to approve it, right?
I will second the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay. As offered.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to funding and finance. Grant, you decide.
Everyone said everything that I had to say.
I tried to avoid some of it, so you get.
Nope, we didn't avoid any of it. Washington 5 million, Tiffy letter of intent is being signed later today, and we're gonna say infrastructure bank is being worked on. I mean, with Hood River County working on toll policy, and we had a visit to Salem, which everybody else talked about. So is there anything else anybody has any questions about?
I'll let you go first next time.
Oh, it's okay.
It's kind of nice.
I'd like to recognize your team. You take a look at, the amount of funding you've been able to scrape together as far as local content, loans and so on. You guys are doing a great job.
Thanks.
And that helps us get through some tough times.
We have more to do. Don't thank us until we're done.
Keep going.
No thanks until we're done.
And I will say, when he brings the boss along, it sure opens some doors down in Salem.
Yeah.
Bringing a baby along, who would have thought that that's like bringing a puppy?
I was kind of against it, but you turned me into a believer. I couldn't believe the number of guys and gals that were oohing and on and.
Including you.
Yeah. I was playing grandfather.
Yeah, like, whoever there's.
You notice I handed her to somebody else across the way there when she needed a diaper change.
Yeah. So yeah, if anybody wishes to babysit Piper in Salem, yeah. Let me know.
She's one of the easiest baby you will babysit.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Super
good baby.
Have a nice day. Great. So yeah, if she fusses or anything, just put her on the floor. Just make sure she's not like messing around with electric cords and she's good. So yeah. If anybody wants to travel down to Salem, take her. Everybody will have a great time.
It's important to bring a future user.
Yeah.
Future bridge user.
Well, that was
That was a joke.
the funny thing was the joke was that we should have put a shirt on her, so invest in my future. It's for me or something.
I will get more of her next time.
Oh, yeah. Right, we'll get back to the bridge. It can easily turn into the Piper Show around here. Engineering and construction, Commissioner Fox and.
Yeah,
team.
we'll start and then the rest of the team here jump in. We did a value engineering workshop. Kiewit hosted. And we looked at, they presented 3 different options. It's in your package if you had a chance to go through it, the presentation. But basically, the alternatives was our standard is the segmental poured in place concrete, which we've been talking about for a couple of years. The other one was a steel bridge with a precast deck on the top, a nice looking steel bridge. And then there was an alternate on a segmental, precast spliced series of beams and stuff. There was a pros and cons list that was developed. The recommendation came out from Kiewit as alternate 2, being steel. And the key things there was, and let me pull it up real quick. On cost, between the other 2, it's a 10 to 15% savings in cost, but more importantly, potentially a year acceleration in the schedule, which means we could have it done tomorrow. And there's some.
Oh, that is not what that means.
And there's some potential in-water foundation work that we could streamline some more as well. So I think the consensus of all of the scoring was steel was first. The cast in place segmental was second. And a further third was the last one, which is the spliced grease paint. So the direction that was kind of given is let's proceed with the steel. We need to keep the cast in place segmental on warm standby for a little bit. And there was 2 actions coming out of it. One, KMC was going to do an evaluation of Kiewit's comparison estimate to make sure that we didn't miss something. And secondly, Kiewit and HNTB were going to meet with Federal Highways. Thomas, what's his name? Parker from Federal Highways was in the meeting with us. And he raised his eyebrows when we said we want to go with the steel. He gave an indication that this could be a significant impact on the EIS and the ROD and its. So we said, wait a minute, let's go make sure that we're seeing all the facts there and we don't get a great big if we go down that path and we shut down the other one. So the estimate review is taking place now. Kiewit has provided the information over to KMC. That's supposed to be done by the end of the week. And I know you folks are meeting with Federal Highways on Wednesday to talk through the issue, potential issue with the schedule on the ride. So, rest of the engineering committee, other thoughts that you guys had?
No, I think you covered it.
Ted.
Where is this analysis? You said it's in a.
Yeah, there's a summary presentation that was attached to this.
Was it the amended one that came out?
Yeah.
Okay, because that one won't load for me. So I have the older one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for some reason I get an error for loading it. Well, it says it's there, it just won't load it.
I didn't see it either. Maybe I was looking at the wrong one as well.
This one came in just.
It came out, I got a copy of it this morning.
Finish or something.
Okay, we'll move on to Bridge Aesthetics Committee.
Yeah. So I'll just talk first from now. So okay, you can catch me when I stop.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we have our next meeting is tomorrow evening. It will be a hybrid meeting again. This meeting we are starting, we're actually going through the draft memo. And what we've kind of discovered as we've been going on, we've gotten Kiewit involved, that we're developing a memo and then Kiewit is going to respond with a design package. So we're going to modify our process a little bit and hold off our public open house, push that out to the fall when Kiewit has some pretty pictures to show with us and some more developed ideas. So tomorrow is really about getting the committee, this is what we think we heard. Is that in fact correct? And then we'll also give them a week to comment on that. So that'll start to wrap that up. We'll re-engage when Kiewit has some images to show. And we're kind of working on how that will manifest itself. And that'll probably be sometime early fall, mid-fall. Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot. Sometime in the I've been hanging around Mike too long. So that's where we are on that. Did I get everything?
We will also be doing a public update on just where we're at for this draft memo to just close the loop on all of the like 800 comments that we received from the public to just say, here's what we heard from you and these are the next steps. And it's also a good opportunity for us to just remind them of what the progressive design build process looks like. And so it will be a brief online open house, mostly informational, but at least like the public will feel like, okay, this is where we're going, progress is being made.
So question for you, you guys came up with this alternate approach of, 2 6-foot bicycle lanes and skinnying down the safety margin on the 2 12-foot lines from 8 to 4 feet. Have we made that decision and given that direction yet? When do you expect us to do that?
So that's not part of the bridge aesthetics committee.
Okay,
That'll be part of the race grant or if when it gets signed in time, if not, then when we get into early design. So he was evaluating those options still to make sure it's the right idea. And then we need to take that out to the public. So we need to have that conversation about the timing of taking that to the public and having a conversation with the community.
And there's a lot of engineering that needs to go into that before. I think the BAC brought up, is 12 feet big enough? They asked the question, and then I think that the engineering team kind of went from there. So
we want this resolved by the end of phase 1A.
For sure, it has to be done by phase 1. Okay. Well, we need to take it out to the public and get some comment on it. We need to look at the drainage, make sure that's all worked out, make sure we've got all the right processes together.
And we want it incorporated into the revised baseline estimate and schedule as well. So you're not going to wait until the end of December to start your baseline. So that decision point is probably October.
That's what I'm thinking. It's September, October. Around the same time, we're going to do this update with the BSC on some of these alternative aesthetics committee stuff.
Okay.
We need to figure out, one of the things was, do we do it with the aesthetic committee and do it at the same time? Do we separate it and have it as a separate conversation? Maybe we can do them both at the same time.
I think it's important to start combining these issues because they all impact each other.
Yeah.
And there's decisions are going to be balancing.
Yeah, there's that, and we also need to
So.
marry that all up with the mitigation activities that have to happen through the NEPA commitments. So all of that is all starting to get combined together and will result in more than one public meeting. So then you're gonna have the raised grant coming in, and we're gonna have to figure out how that fits into.
So on that subject, Mike, can you make sure that the drawing that you shared with me, can you make sure that as it is does not go out? Because that again has sharrows suggesting that there can be cars driving in the bike lane, which I don't think is the intent.
No.
There's a bunch of other things wrong with it, so it's not ready for prime time as a.
Yeah, it was more of a graphical representation.
That's fine. For me, it's fine, but
yeah,
I don't think it should be public in any way.
We will check. I don't know. It might already be in a small format on something though. Okay.
Because it kind of makes it look like whoever is doing the bike consulting doesn't know bikes.
Yes. Right. If you get into the, yes, if
Yep.
you, would agree. And the person who did the renderings did.
Which is fine. It served the purpose that I needed.
Yeah.
And you were communicating with me and that's great, but public is different.
Yeah, gotcha.
People will be all over that stuff.
And that's part of why we were talking about waiting on some of the next round of renderings or drawings to the public with Bridge Aesthetics Committee as well. Because we don't want to put too many things out there that people latch onto.
Right.
When they're not real, they're just ideas.
Right.
So we're trying to manage that, showing them ideas, but not committing ideas. So
Right. I'm wondering,
as soon as somebody sees it, it becomes a commitment, no matter what you say.
the steel versus segmental concrete, has that worked its way? I missed the meeting today, but does that work its way into the bridge aesthetics discussion at all?
I mean, it's been a topic, and until we get to that response from a contractor, I don't think we can resolve that.
Right.
The profile is similar. I think the big objection that you might have is it's not a single structural box element. It's multiple
The
elements.
aesthetics committee has provided some guidelines or memo guidance around if it is steel, here's kind of what we'd like steel to look like. If it's concrete, here's what we'd like concrete to look like. Those kind of things have been discussed at the aesthetic committee. So like they want weathering steel if it's steel, right? They don't want a blue
Right.
steel bridge or
Right.
purple bridge or.
I've been at those meetings. I just, I mean, steel, it was such a peripheral subject. I mean, if they got a minute and a half discussion, that was a lot.
But that's also been kind of beyond the superstructure is not part of the purview here. How you experience the bridge is. So I think the broadest discussion we had is if you're a voter or a river user, that's the biggest impact to you probably. And did we get more than a minute and a half? Probably not much, but I'll give you that.
I'm not objecting to that. I'm just making an observation of this. I think many members of the aesthetics committee would probably be pretty surprised if in 3 months, 6 months, we came out with the drawing of the steel bridge. And it's like, wait, this is nothing like anything we talked about. And they may be pleasantly surprised, who knows? But I think that there would be some amount of dissonance.
One of the things that Eric and I are talking about is how do we continue conversations with that committee, even though the memo may be completed. So these are perfect opportunities for us to circle back with them as we continue to learn things. Like just because we're not working on a memo anymore, I imagine that we'll still be giving them updates and just letting them know where we're headed. So any feedback that you have on that further is helpful from my perspective too.
And maybe the big thing is using that committee to talk about the reasoning of why certain decisions are made. Because nothing's going to be made on a whim.
Right.
And that's kind of where everything has very good reasons from this point forward. There's a very good reason why every decision is made. So it's just whether we can clearly articulate that and timely.
I would say at a future meeting, probably in July, we should talk about next steps for the Bridge Aesthetics Committee. What does the authority want them to do going forward? Because they are getting close to the end of what the original goal was. And do they have a future goal or future responsibility that you guys want to use them for?
So you want to put that on the agenda for next meeting?
Probably July, once we get through that open house on the 17th and then do it. Maybe the 22nd.
The open house will be, we've decided to do that virtual, so it's probably more than one meeting conversation. Because I think it's evolving, and it would be nice to get some pushback from Hewitt on how we kind of get that other piece and re-engage them, because I think that's part of it.
But there is a committee meeting tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Right. That's physical.
It's hybrid.
Right. But if I come here, I won't be the only one here.
That's right.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, let's move into the government's admin and operations committee.
So Grant made all of my points, so
You're welcome.
nothing left for me. No, we have the bylaws, which are on the agenda today. And just remind people that, those have been through legal review, et cetera, but once we pass it, then we own it and we get to amend them in the future. So this is our initial bylaws. And as we see how things work, we can make changes.
Okay, any questions? Hearing none, we will move on then to our new business, our action item. Number 1 is the changing the name of the governing body to the Board of Commissioners. Resolution 2024-4.
This was a legal discussion because there's questions relating to why this change needs to be done, and I'll turn that over to legal to answer those questions if there is any.
Are there any questions from board members? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Move we adopt resolution 2024-4.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Now let's move back up to our adoption of the bylaw. Did everyone have a chance to review the bylaws? Did you find any fatal flaws? It better not be you.
I think I read this more than anybody, but just an observation. When we talk about the budget committee, I was thinking about this as the budget committee today. The wording is a little bit funny in that, unfortunately, no, I had to read and I can't get anything up on my screen. I got rid of the new version. I can't get the old version back up. But the language there makes it sound. That's okay. I just describe what's going on. It says that the members of the budget committee are the 6 members of the Board of Commissioners and 6 members of the public, 3 from each state. Probably should have been a slightly more generic language to say that there'll be 6 members following the same rules as we do for everything else regarding the Board of Commissioners.
So it could be members and alternates.
So you have an alternate there instead. It's going to be 6, but it's going to be 6 using the same structure and the same rules as the rest. I think that's probably implicit in this. But
we should probably modify or amend that at some point then.
Maybe we should keep a hot list of things for our first amendment and plan amendment in 3 months or 6 months. And that probably should be added to that list. Definitely.
Are you referencing the sections on committee specific to budget committees?
Yes.
The version I have in front of me that we're voting on says the authority shall establish a budget committee in accordance with RS 204 TAC 336. Is that?
Yeah, but that just says that doesn't say membership. It goes to the next sentence.
There is no next sentence.
It's in the section on committees. It's in there twice.
Is it in there? Okay. That was one question I had was.
Mark, I'm sorry, what section is it in?
I don't have it in front of me, but there's a section on committees. And hopefully we will have you out of the budget committee process at some point because you really shouldn't even be in it.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, where it describes who the members of that, who the members of the budget committee are, it could be a little clearer.
So hopefully we'll not have to deal with that next year.
Yeah. And hopefully,
So an item for first revision, I think probably needs to be something along the lines of, we're eventually going to hire a staff. We've got acting now, a couple of people. We need to discuss who's on a committee to review, interview, make recommendations for like an executive director.
But all of that is that fits within these bylaws, that there's a process by which the chair and co-chair can appoint committees and appoint special members to do things like that. So we can do ad hoc committees as long as it's below a quorum.
Yes. Any other questions and thoughts on the bylaws? Figured this would take some time.
So Arthur, you own basically this document, is that right? Of the draft of it.
It's been through a whole bunch of reviews. So
for as far as potential, I have some minor comments on some of it that I don't think are, relating to some of the roles that are defined. Nothing that's, I think needs to be incorporated into initial draft, but some things that maybe consider for a future draft. Can I just send those to you?
You can send them to me, or you can just bring them up now if you kind of want to hear what other people have to say about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I should put some more work into it, but I think, looking at the chief financial officer role, I think we should have some discussion around, what that looks like in both an interim and then a long-term capacity. If cash flow forecasting and planning is not something that's currently incorporated in that role. It's obviously a critical function for us, right now. And then long-term, how we're doing rate setting and what our goals are around that. Also seems like potentially a critical function that we would want to have some guidance and leadership from. And I don't know if that continues to live with PFM in perpetuity, or if our staff ends up having responsibilities relating to that. But those
the way that I read the second one, the rate setting issue, the way that I read it is that right up front it says the Board of Commissioners has the job of setting the rates.
Yeah.
And that would therefore mean to me that the Board of Commissioners can use staff in whatever way they see reasonable or necessary in order to do that. And are you suggesting there should be some goals for the rates?
Well, we're gonna set rates based on a set of assumptions, right? And so somebody needs to monitor their performance relative to those assumptions, and then recommend potential updates relative to what we're seeing, either in changes in anticipated spend or revenue that are based on sort of the actual realities, right? And so I don't think we want to leave it up to our committee or commissioners to have to gather that data and then come to our own conclusions. And we'd like staff probably to do that analysis and for us to review that analysis based on guidance. Is that
so you're imagining sort of what I'm hearing is kind of a job description, details of what the CFO is responsible for. Is that
we get into that a little bit.
Yeah. I'm wondering if that's something that belongs in the bylaws or something that we should have a different set of documents.
That's a great question. And it wasn't totally, I had some other comments that were kind of similar in that, where it's like we kind of dabble into job descriptions a little bit in the bylaws. And there were some other kind of key roles that I think will, as we develop those positions and job descriptions, will certainly be in there, but it wasn't clear how much of that needed to be in the bylaws.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I tend to like to have bylaws being a relatively high level, but there's nothing that prevents us from either going to deeper level or from adding an exhibit or from having a reference to, the Board of Commissioners responsible for the current set of job descriptions, and then that's a separate document which lives separately.
Yeah, and we could probably maybe do a combination of that and just address it at a really high level of saying, the CFO is responsible for overseeing the financial forecasts and revenue and ensuring that we're tracking, as well as managing cash. And those will be true no matter how we scope.
Sure, no, that totally makes sense. Yep, great. Yeah, if you want to put something in writing, and we can add that to our list, which Mike has started just a couple of minutes ago.
Do you feel the current document is okay to start with?
I do. I mean, just to kind of circle back to that point, is there's a lot that could be added in here as we start getting into kind of roles and responsibilities for positions that, we are going to develop, more thoroughly as we get deeper into it. So I think the bulk of it, which is sort of how, the mechanisms of how the board works, or how the Board of Commissioners works, that seemed pretty solid.
Yeah, I think groups like this, we are all very alert and know all the issues, and we work together well. But this is a document which is going to live for decades and is going to be dealt with by people who may not be us. So it definitely won't be. Exactly. So it definitely makes sense. I mean, in terms of character, also. So just it may be people who view it as a different job, and the more things that we put into writing, the more roles and responsibilities that are carefully delineated, I think that's always a good thing. So I like the idea of us over time developing sets of documents around that, whether it fits in the bylaws or not. I think you're absolutely right that if we can start to put that stuff in writing so that it's not a mystery in the future as to what the intent is, I think that's good.
I have a question, kind of in that same lane of the jobs that are outlined. Do we also need to be declaring in here what that authority is to terminate an employee once the authority has the bridge authority has employees, or will that be in contracts? And maybe that's a question for legal, but I know
I see Mark has his hand raised, even, so maybe he has an answer to that and other things.
and
Art?
I think at some point when you do, there are a couple of changes in the agency that are coming. One will be obviously the hiring of more permanent staff. And that we will want to, when you go further down that road, examine who is in charge of hiring, firing, and reviewing, promoting and demoting. And that will be important but I think it's a little premature now to try and figure out what that might be in the future. But that is absolutely something that should be addressed in the bylaws. The other having to do with the functions of the CFO, a lot of that I think is going to fall out of the financial policies that the board eventually adopts. And I think you're going to get a presentation on that later today, at least with respect to tolling. But the board is going to want to at some point adopt some broad-based financial policies that guide how the finances of the authority work. Because that's how you get a good management score when rating agencies come in to determine whether you're creditworthy or not. And so coming out of that, I think would be a good time also to review the bylaws and make sure that they're in sync with the financial policies that you wind up adopting.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, any other, anything else to add to the hot list for the next bylaws update?
Actually, I do have one other question for Mark, kind of along those lines. So one of the things we've encountered as we've started getting into some of these grant reimbursements has been that differentiation between project funding and administrative funding. And I'm wondering if we looked at all scoping sort of the bridge authority to be really our only service is, at least for now, is in the construction of the bridge and operation of the bridge. And so it's been a little bit of like, I think we've got kind of a two-part issue of like, one is how do we define project expenses versus administrative expenses? And then the second is sort of like what is, and then getting that into into our grants so that true administrative work we're able to fund using, using our grants rather than having to borrow money for that.
That's something that we've been talking about, and normally the scope of permitted activities for an entity is defined in its articles of incorporation or its charter. And so I actually think that the most potent way of getting that across to funders would be to amend your formation agreement, similar to the way that you're amending it to change directors to commissioners, but to actually declare that you are, for all intents and purposes, a single purpose entity, and that all of the money that you take in and all of the money that you expend is on this one particular mission. That's not the way that we normally draft a corporate charter, right? Normally you'd be able to do all kinds of things if you were a nonprofit corporation, say. But it is the way that you would draft a special purpose entity charter to give funders in particular comfort that you are not going to be spending your money on anything other than in pursuit of the mission as defined in your charter. So that's something that we probably ought to be talking to funders about and saying, would this be more persuasive if our charter limited our activities to this particular mission?
Okay, thanks.
Great question and great answer. Continue to look into it. Okay. Is there anything else on the bylaws? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the adoption of the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority bylaws.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, motion carries. All right. We're gonna go back to, I just lost again, new business, the credit card for the Bridge Authority. Who wants to take on that liability?
Apparently it's me. So it has come up from time to time about whether or not, like, when small purchases are made, and Mike may be able to jump in here and clarify that, because I just kind of sit back and go, oh, okay. That it would be convenient to have a credit card. Then the question, so then, by the way, you do have a checking account now with a bank. And so you are officially, with Umpqua, and so they do offer a couple of different credit card programs. If you want a single credit, so some options are, you can have a single credit card just in the name of Bridge Authority. You can have several of them that go to specific individuals that have authority to spend money under certain parameters, whatever you want to set up. They also offer a purchasing card program, but until you have employees, it probably doesn't make sense really to go down that path, because that's a bit more like the port is doing that now, where we have them and, managers have authority over their staff and all that. But it generally, like I say, it's typically a little bit larger entities that have that with multiple staff. So kind of the question came up basically is, do you even want a credit card? Does it make sense to get a credit card for the Bridge Authority? And if so, do you want a single card that's in the name of the authority? Or do you want, several of them with perhaps, I don't know, Mike and Shannon and one or two of the co-chairs or something like that? So it's kind of a discussion.
So what are the types of things that you'd use it for nowadays?
It would be purchases that maybe were directly for the authority that may not be reimbursable. It could be also used to pay for your expenses if you're going somewhere.
Hotel reservations.
Hotel reservations, travel type things. It's not required, or, we've been working with it the way it is now. It was just if people would be more comfortable putting it on a Bridge Authority card than their personal card.
And
Just wanted to ask the question and see if there was a preference or if somebody desired to do it.
Yeah, we had,
Another.
whatever, I don't remember what it was that came up. We were talking about getting, refreshments for a meeting, and I said, well, we can use my port credit card and do a reimbursement, but then.
I think that's a great idea.
Says the one port commissioner in the room. So, I mean, it gets reimbursed, so it's, but it just.
Would it
Not
say,
a big need for it. It's just something that if you felt more comfortable being able to use that.
but would it save staff time to have would it, I think time, if it's gonna save like expense reports and stuff?
Expense reports done the same way regardless, so.
Okay.
Seems like something that's coming, but maybe not quite
Not
there
there
yet.
yet.
Yeah, that's kind of,
Honestly,
Even if it comes, the process of doing it's the same either way, whether you're doing a reimbursement or a credit. It doesn't necessarily take any less time or matter. So unless it's a big deal, it makes no difference fiscally.
my experience with traveling is that it actually is more confusing when it's not your credit card that your reservation has been made under, and they can't find it, and they're not sure who you are, and you don't know what name it's under, and it just.
And let's be honest, you don't want that.
I'd say hold off a little bit. But you do raise another question. I know Jake and I and you were on the checking account at.
Yes,
Is there any money in there?
$100.
Is there-
I did, well, to open it, so you have that, so I took the liberty of putting $100 in there and coded it as the loan from the port. So it's a zero interest loan, so there's no, there's no impact, at least not to the Bridge Authority. And, $100, so we're tracking it, but it does show as loan from the port. And you do have, you do have an LGIP account also that did get set up. But then when I went to transfer money, your the toll revenue was going to get transferred into that. And then I realized that the port's LGIP was not authorized to put into the Bridge Authority's LGIP. So I filled out another form for that. So this is like the 10th form that I've had to submit for this process. But I did fill out that other form. And so hopefully within the next day or two, the money will get transferred into your own LGIP account.
Debbie, just realized the next time you build a bridge will be much easier.
Well, as long as it's the Bridge Authority doing the building, because it's, just getting this LGIP account opened up took.
Oh, we're gonna go do I-5 after this.
Okay, well, we got it. We're good.
If we're gonna do that, we may as well move on to the budget officer resolution.
So it did occur to me also, that's also mine. It did occur to me as I was moving through here. I have the last few entities that I've worked for and worked with had the budget officer identified in the charter. Yours was not, and so you need a budget officer. And so I just made it the finance director. So hopefully you guys are all good with that. All the budget officer does is present the budget message. That's really their only role.
The way that I've dealt with it in city and county is that the board of commissioners or the city council appoints a budget officer.
Yeah.
And it can actually be done every year. There's usually a resolution every year saying, we appoint the finance director or the city manager as the budget director.
Yes.
Legal's gonna get out of this in a year, so we're talking one time.
And that's that possibility.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on that.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing today.
Yes.
That's what
You're
we're doing
just
today.
appointing me as the budget
And we
officer.
have a resolution for that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, with that, is there anybody who'd like to make a motion to appoint our interim finance director as our budget officer?
Make that motion?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
If it is interim, should this not also track that and just say interim finance director? Or make it generic to allude to appointed finance director and not make it attached to persons that.
Actually, I think what we're doing is we're appointing Debbie for this year.
Actually, I did write it as finance director.
Yeah, but not with interim. I just heard.
So we could add interim. Yes, I believe that is my official title.
Would you like to make that a friendly amendment?
Yeah, that's not the rules, but sure.
You good with it?
I will second that, whatever that was.
Well, it's not because that doesn't actually exist. So.
Okay. Somebody's got to
Can
clarify.
we adopt it? Is this, I guess it's more than a scrivener. It's like we're changing something. So.
See, to me, this is a scrivener's because the interim
Is there, we're just.
interim in every way acts as
Yes.
as the finance director.
Oh, I guess
So
I
I
did
don't
put
think
my
there's
name in
any
there.
need for that.
Oh, okay.
I would need for it. The whole process, this whole concept of friendly amendments and stuff doesn't exist in Robert's Rules of Order, so we're not doing that right, but we don't have to because it doesn't exist.
So we have a motion, a second on the table to adopt the resolution as presented.
Do we need to strike Debbie's name from it because it does actually say specifically?
Because that's for this year,
Yeah. In British people, I just want to make sure it's for this.
and we can change it in the future.
Okay.
Okay.
Aye.
Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. That was a close one. You almost didn't get it, Debbie.
And I don't, in fact, I was teasing Mike. I said it could be him, but I don't care who it is. It's just that when you do get an audit, they're going to say, did you approve a budget officer? And if you say no, then you get a strike against you. So that's why this is in here. I'm all about the audit.
Well, let's move on to our CDM Smith Master Agreement, 2024-6. We have a resolution.
Yes, so there's a resolution in the package. If there's anybody has questions, we can answer questions. Needs more explanation as to what it's for, we can do that too. Hope you're good with it.
So, and we spoke. And
And
they
I wanted to point out, this is a form of master agreement. And this is the way that these types of contracts are typically styled. So, but what's happening here is the board is authorizing the execution of the master agreement with CDM Smith. And then there are task force or task orders that are issued under the master agreement that are subject to the terms of the master agreement. And so the resolution authorizing the master agreement also authorizes the project director to issue task orders in an aggregate amount of up to $1 million, which is the scope of work that the project director, along with PFM, have determined is reasonable to complete this particular study, which is a requirement for applying for the TIFIA loan.
And this was,
So right now, our executive director acting is Kevin.
No, I put in the project director for either of the
Okay.
first co-chairs.
Okay.
If you'd rather have it be the executive director, you can certainly amend it. But my understanding was that the task orders would be issued, generally speaking, by Mr. Shannon. And in his absence, one of the co-chairs.
There's only one.
Yeah.
Okay, so which way were you guys leaning? You want to leave it as drafted?
and just for our, according to this, it looks as though the Washington State Transportation Commission selected CDM Smith, correct?
Originally.
Yeah.
No, they
Okay, so
originally,
I wanted
yeah.
to point out how we got to this CDM Smith so that people are aware that, yeah, so that's an interesting piece of information because
Yeah, so,
somebody else did all the other work, correct?
well,
So
you know,
that's
it's,
the base of the source
Yep. That makes sense.
yeah, it's basically a two-step process where there's a preliminary report and then a final report. It really makes little sense to switch horses midstream. And to add to that, there's really only two firms that are capable
Yeah.
of doing this work. So we could have gone through a full-blown procurement process for the second stage. But we probably would have got two proposals, and one probably would have been superior because they've already done half the work.
So basically, you don't want to switch horses in midstream when you only have one horse?
Pretty much.
Okay, got it.
Well, I just know there's been questions before. I know another commissioner and I always have questions. How do we get to this selection? I think this is validated the reasoning why they're going in that way. So
Yeah,
I just
and
want to
in
point
it-
that section out.
Yeah, and in addition, the HNTB folks are also applying expressly for an exception under the federal procurement regulations to permit this sole source contract to be reimbursed under the federal grants. So and this resolution authorizes and directs the staff to continue on that process.
In fact, there are 7 tasks in their negotiation. They're gonna issue tax orders for they are all at a reasonable price.
Yeah,
Any further discussion? I think that was valid to bring up and wondering how we got here and, without going through that process. And not hearing anything else, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion, we adopt resolution 2024-6 for master services agreement for CDM Smith.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Let's move on to our informational items.
Yeah, very quickly, risk register, there's a link out there. We did have a meeting with Kiewit to link the construction risks with the design risks, so that is being updated. We will start to present, I'll call it the top 10 opportunities, top 10 risks, that'll be included at the first of the month for the board to just take a look at. And if you have questions on it, it'll be under the informational items. And then the budget committee update, this is just kind of outlines the meetings that took place and that we have selected the 6 members. If there's any questions or discussion about that, you go for anything on that. If there's anything.
One thing I didn't follow, so the meeting that we're having today, is that a properly noticed budget committee meeting? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And it was purposely kept separate from this meeting.
No, I see that.
But yes, we did get the notice out. Yes.
And
Oh, I'm sorry, board members, can I back up just a little bit? I made an error in describing to you a provision of the CDM resolution. Those task orders are authorized to be signed by either of the co-chairs or the finance director, not the project director.
Okay,
Well, now you know.
now I know what has my name on it.
We have to amend the vote.
Oh, and not unless you want to change it. That's what it said. He's telling us what we just voted on.
Great.
Let's see how hers makes them.
I know, Jake, here we go. What do you think?
Yeah, he was clarifying what he told you.
Yeah.
So-
As long as you're comfortable with the authority as written, that would be the finance director or either co-chair, then you don't need to revote. If you want to go back and amend it, then you would need to revote.
Does anybody see a reason to amend it?
No.
Hearing none? All right, let's continue on, Mike, with our
All right,
information.
my
item.
apologies for that confusion.
No problem, Mark. Thank you.
The Hood River County loan, we are meeting with Hood River County on Wednesday. Once the terms are further developed, then we'll bring that back to the full board. We talked about the biological opinion and then the updated Fall Avenue report is passed.
Yes, we are
Yeah.
at $2.7 million that I will transfer into your LGIP account as soon as I can.
Is that on track for what we thought we would be, or we're
A bit behind, but it's not concerning yet.
Okay.
The winter is always very questionable, and it really depends on when the weather starts getting nice and the weekends and people are coming across the bridge on the weekends. That's what really generates additional revenue.
Well, what I saw yesterday, it's crazy yesterday.
Oh, I bet.
We just need to avoid fires all summer and we'll be,
Yeah.
yeah. We'll catch up.
you just sit out and just watch from your and you're like.
I guess I stare straight down at the bridge all day long, so I see every car that comes across it.
I figured Mike would be out there. with it.
That's my guess.
Keep going, Mike. Keep us on track.
Upcoming action items, the insurance, Bridge Authority insurance, you probably remember us going through that last year. That's up. We're working through that with Schwab. Chubb, sorry. With Chubb, so that'll come back to you on the 24th. The lobbyist contracts as well expire at the end of June. We'll work through the governance committee. The memos have been sent over. We'll have a discussion around that. And if there's no issues, bring that back to you on the 24th as well. And then the budget review coming out of the budget committee meeting will come back on the 24th. And then the PFM contract is really, that one's coming off. Actually, we thought we were gonna have to bring that back, but we do not have to, so that won't have to come back. We do have a draft reimbursement agreement with WashDOT that will reimburse them as we start to get into design reviews. For any time that they spend, I think it was roughly around 60,000, so we'll finalize that, but we'll bring that back. But that'll just reimburse them for their time reviewing when we request their review of the plans. And then the real estate policies are still in conversations with FHWA, so those will come back once we get some things finalized, primarily around the port and how we're going to treat that. There's some different options that we're working with FHWA to understand which option. Once we have that, then we'll bring that back to you. RFP for an auditor. Do you have a date on when you want to do that, Debbie?
I'm still trying to figure out if you're gonna need an audit this year.
Okay.
So we may not need an auditor this year.
And then you have two more policies coming back in July timeframe, the invoice policy and a parallel policy.
That's it. Any questions on any of our upcoming or informational items?
When we do the lobbyist contract, what's that process like?
So it'll go through the government relations. So we're getting memos from them right now based on their last year activities. So we're working on a GR plan. So we'll sit down with the government relations committee and talk through what the plan is and what we need from each lobbyist and then bring that back to the board.
Are we looking at going out?
So getting, we're soliciting, right?
We did solicited already and the procurement is done. So in immediate up to $150,000 for the River group. Then we contacted the qualify the forms and got the responses. And then made a determination and presented to the committee. It's gonna be presented on 12th.
So there was a solicitation, there was a
Yes.
response as you are,
Yes.
okay, just asking,
Went through
just
that
wanting,
Sorry,
seems like a lot of turnover in people that we've been working with, so just wondering.
Yeah, sorry, we went
Thank
through that whole process to get to that short list.
It's fine.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. And I thought that is a very gossipy group. It took about 10 minutes from the time we talked to somebody about wanting names to it getting back to that person, asking what's going on. So, yeah, it was interesting.
Hey, one other brief before you start the tolling, we got a few minutes. You want to tell them about the company that we met with? I think it's
on my screen.
PW about the TIFIA loans.
Yeah, so some of you may remember Pinware is how they call their abbreviation. It's PNWER, Pacific Northwest, and I can't remember what the ENAR are. They get a raise grant, or not a raise grant, sorry, they get grants from the federal government to help accelerate projects and help to support the development of TIFIA loans. Early on last year, we had met with them and had a discussion about them helping this project. They were waiting on their new grant. We continued with the TIFIA process, so we really got kind of ahead of them with the TIFIA process. But we had a really good conversation with them Wednesday of this week about other elements or where they maybe could assist us in. And we are kind of their number one project as far as showing how their accelerator program works. It's kind of a mutual benefit there, and that we are progressing things and helping them, but they also have very good connections and are setting up what they call the Northwest Governance or Northwest Committee. But that's going to be the Oregon State Legislature, Transportation Commission folks, so McLean, Gorsuch, those with the Washington group, Phi, Leas, King, with federal, and are going to put that group together to talk about projects and prioritizing projects in the Northwest, especially ones that'll be as part of their incubator acceleration program. So we're trying to engage in that and also engage in when they set that meeting up, us being able to bring our project to them and be kind of their pilot project. So I think it'll bring a lot of positive exposure to the project to the right people in Oregon, Washington, and the feds for, this project kind of as a priority in the region to show how TIFIA can be used to help fund and bring projects along that are maybe short on funding or not funded by, all one source.
And if you remember, Marlon and Jake, a couple of years ago when we were in DC, this company was brought up as a best practice for us.
It is, yep. They do it all under that.
And it doesn't cost us anything.
It's called the Build Northwest Council. Is what they're putting together. So, I think it'll be good. They're gonna there's a couple of things they were hoping to coordinate with us, to be presenters for a couple of events they're looking at. They haven't got the details all worked out, but, we weren't sure what the conversation was gonna be about because TIFIA had gotten kind of ahead of them. But it sounds like there's a lot of synergy there to still work with them, and I think, exposure for the project that'll come.
For the most part, we've been meeting with the people that they
would have
referenced already.
Yep.
But this, I think, is just another catalyst to help us bring more of them together and talk as a group.
And they're very excited to promote the project as being one of their, leading accelerator projects and showing, like I said, how TIFIA can make a difference on a project. So they were very, very excited about the project. I got the impression that they were.
Is our project the only one that they are?
It's
using as a pilot, or is it?
Northwest, there's 5 states, it's Oregon, Washington, Montana, Idaho.
And Alaska.
And then they also do work in Canada, the 5 states.
And they referenced I think one project over in Idaho that was kind of up on their list.
Yeah, but we were at the top of their list.
direction? Continue moving forward, work with the group? Consensus? Tell them to bring us some grant dollars. Okay,
I think it's interesting if you have a group that is a best practices back in Washington, DC. But you have an FWHA who says, no, this is a high risk project because of our delivery method. Best practices that works on a different delivery method saying, no, this is our number one. That seems like that starts to at least give you something to lever against to say, no, we're not high risk.
right.
Maybe that's their strategy.
Ooh. Sounds like staff has direction to move forward. All right, we are ahead of schedule like I was told to be, so we will move into our presentation for our tolling workshop. It's been by PFM. Screen share or bring that up?
Yes, because I'm PFM. Hi. I'm Peter Schellenberger from PFM. Good to see everybody today. I will screen share. Let's see if I.
Thanks for doing this in person.
Oh, it's absolutely. I've been here a couple times, but it's good to be back.
They're always looking for a reason to come to the beautiful.
You've read it.
Exactly. Yes, I am.
I said I went through it.
Oh,
You need one more?
yeah. Sure. I guess I'll take notes.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to focus on tolls, the importance of toll revenues and how they're currently structured within your plan of finance. And the goal is really to sync up how we're thinking about toll revenues, particularly as you're forming your toll rate policy, which will go directly into your investment grade traffic and revenue study, such as on that prior item, CDM Smith. I'll be pulling in some information from the planning level study that CDM Smith did produce for the Washington State Transportation Commission. So we'll look at some results that they've provided, but those results made it into our plan of finance. We structured the initial loan request for TIFIA, which is 105 million. And it turns out that's about the max amount. Again, sort of constrained by this long-term toll revenue forecast. So we'll look at why that is constrained or how it's constrained. And so that's going to be an important takeaway, sort of syncing up how we think about the forecast, syncing it up with your toll rate policy, and then with the ongoing discussion and eventual negotiation with TIFIA, just to make sure those are all consistent. And of course, with your discourse and your outreach with the public and the financial markets. All right, so I'll go down a little bit more into what the purpose is of today and sort of set the framework here. The importance of tolls. Toll revenues are the sole source for funding operation and maintenance on the bridge. That gets paid first. We'll look at the sort of application. There'll be a strict application and flow of funds. First thing to get paid will be O&M costs, then principal and interest on the TIFIA loan. We'll need to plan ahead for the life cycle costs of this bridge and deposit certain annual deposits towards the renewal and replacement or major maintenance on the bridge. And then we'll have to fund up reserves. And the one source for doing all of the above are toll revenues. Given that, lenders and rating agencies take a very skeptical eye on toll revenue forecasts. Our argument we've already met with one of the rating agencies, a couple of the commissioners, Commissioner Fox Wilson was with us. We've met with Kroll, and our argument was, look at this long traffic history with this bridge. This is really not a greenfield new bridge. This is a replacement bridge that traffic should carry directly over, which is true. We still believe that to be true. There is just a sticky skepticism that comes with lenders and with the rating agencies. And so they continue, even with our forecast from CDM Smith, they really haircut it, stress test it, say they will continue to stress test that forecast. That third bullet, TIFI in particular will look for a commitment from leadership, from yourselves, in maintaining sufficient toll revenues to make sure that they get repaid, essentially. And that'll be structurally sort of codified in the covenants within the loan agreement. So we'll get to the point where we negotiate that, but there will be covenants that state the bridge authority will maintain tolls sufficient to hit a certain ratio. And that's usually 1.25 times. So for every dollar of debt service that you own a given year, we need to have at least 1.25 toll revenues after O&M costs and net toll revenues that came in the prior year. So we'll be certifying somebody, the CFO, will be certifying to that each and every year. So there's a statement, there's a sort of verbal commitment that'll find its way into the documents. As noted, they've already started to kick the tires. Kroll has reviewed the CDM Smith study on a planning and level basis. Granted, that's going to change as you go through the investment grade study. That's going to change. And we just got to, for a $105 million TIFIA loan, we just got to a BBB minus indicative rating.
Does that mean?
Good question. What does that mean? So
Good.
Here's how the ratings go. Highest possible rating is a AAA rating, right? If there's zero risk of default, there's just no concern in the world. You're a AAA. There are very few of those. Then it drops into the AA category, and there's notches: AA plus, AA flat, AA minus. Still very strong. A plus, A flat, A minus. Okay. Then we get into the BBB category, which is the final category of investment grade, and it goes BBB plus, BBB, and then BBB minus. So, yeah, which is not to be surprised, because this is not a sales tax. If they were looking at your regional economy and they were looking at your sales tax, they would say, okay, let's look at the long history of consumption and the economic base and wealth factors, and that would be a AA rating. You look at ODOT, it's got a AAA rating. You look at the state of Washington, it's got a AAA rating. This is a single asset toll. It's a bridge. If something happened to that, the revenue stops. So that's the primary reason. It's not that they're concerned with the governance or the nature of the project, but it is just such a limited source of revenue. And it can be, you can think of, right, especially post-COVID, any number of circumstances which could disrupt that revenue. So that's the challenge. And if there's a system of bridges, like the Bay Area Toll Authority down in the Bay Area that has a AA rating, because there are 7 different bridges. And so if one bridge, has to shut down for a period of time, there's some sort of cross collateralization and other bridges that can continue to generate revenue. Here it's a single bridge, and it's the sole source for revenue. So it's going to be difficult to get out of the BBB minus category, but worry not, I guess is the message. That is in part why we're going after the TIFIA loan. The TIFIA loan is going to be an interest rate tied to the prevailing treasury rate. And for a 30-year loan, it's going to be 30-year treasury, and that's about 4.6% today, I believe. And you get that 4.6 whether you're BBB minus or AAA. So there is no rate penalty. There is a bit of a subsidy from TIFIA. There is no rate penalty based on just coming in. So we've sort of been intentional about this. We want to find a reasonable level of borrowing that can be supported, but also we're not leaving a whole lot on the table here. We're structuring this in such a way that you're right at the BBB minus. You may need less, but this is showing your max capacity and gets you to investment grade, so we could check that box for TIFIA.
If I may, what happens if interest rates continue to climb? Does that number automatically go down, or?
Yeah, it would. We've run our sizing here. You're gonna force.
When do we lock in the rate? Don't we lock it in?
So we're building in some cushion. We got 75 basis points of cushion. So we're all assuming that rates go up.
Okay.
So right now we're running, this 105 is based on a 5.24%. But as I say, today it's 4.6. So we got some conservatism built into future treasury rates.
So when you actually get to it though, say the rates stay the same, could that 105 go up to eat up the difference between the 0.75?
That is a mathematically, yes. But we're going to submit a letter of interest to TIFIA today or tomorrow that asks for 105 million. And so it's difficult to continue to resubmit a request to TIFIA. So that's why I say TBD. We want them to think, and we don't want to come in with the bare minimum that we need. We want to think about the max, and there's 105, and maybe that max could change. So we could come back to that and discuss that.
Right, yeah. But if interest rates go down rather than the 75, you look at for every percent, say it's a percent less, 105 could easily turn into 150, 160, right? And
Maybe not that big of a jump, but it could increase.
36 years.
We're communicating to the legislatures, the state legislatures, that we have the capacity of borrowing up to 105 million and supporting it with tolls, right? Isn't that the message that we've been?
I think the message is we're gonna borrow 70, but.
Well, that's actually what, that was.
Where is going for this?
We
don't really know what the total cost of this bridge is gonna be. So what kind of room do we have above 105?
We said 75 to 105 is what we were going to borrow with TIFIA. Those are the numbers that I recall we've been working with for quite a while. And I'm kind of, if you were raising that number, I would be nervous that could distract the legislature from providing the monies that we're asking them for, because they can start to say, well, maybe you should have a higher percentage that you're.
I don't think we're talking today about change in the application at all.
Right.
Our plan is 70. We're putting some contingency in, going to 100, 105. But the question is, what if?
Yeah, I'm only asking in terms of hypothetical, if interest rates go down, technically your borrowing capacity goes up. And is that something that we could keep our BBB rating, because the amount we're paying is going to be the same?
From a math perspective, the answer is yes. And then you got your discussions with TIFIA and then the policy, right? You guys can discuss the policy levels. And then the TIFIA is also not a no-brainer. They don't really like you to say, shoot, you've been saying you need 105. It's up to 122. But we could probably do that at a point in time. We can't continually move that.
Right.
But your math is absolutely correct.
When is the current plan to close?
September of 2025. Just before, we have to have it closed before construction can start.
So with the BBB- rating, there's no way we can change that. That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, it sounds as though that actually is a good rating given the current rates and stuff of what we're asking. Is that correct?
It is, we're not surprised. It's an acceptable rating, and it's for a single asset bridge that could stop revenue production overnight. Said we knew it would be in the BBB category. Would have been great to get BBB. We weren't saying shoot. We're hoping for an A+.
We couldn't ask for more money if we had a different rating. Is that okay? Great. That's
if the rating went down,
you could ask for more money.
No, if the rating went down, you could get no money.
But if the rating went up, we'd get the same amount.
So the amount of money we're asking for is because of what we have created as what we need to be asking for. BBB rating has nothing to do with how much.
It's gateway.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's what the totals as presented would support.
Right.
It is true that we need to have investment grade.
It is a TIFIA requirement to have investment grade. And there's no rate benefit from getting a AAA and a BBB-. So this, I guess, two takeaways on this is the max amount that we can get under this set of conditions, set of conditions, the max. And then secondly, we're going to walk through, again, the real topic of the day, toll revenues. And we've structured this loan repayment over the 34-year period according to that toll revenue forecast. And rating agencies have looked at that forecast and our plan of finance. And we may look at that toll revenue forecast and say, that's rosy. You should be thanking us to have access to that toll revenue. But in reality, what they've done is looked at it, stress tested, haircut it a little bit, and the result is a BBB-. So those are the two takeaways. One is we're kind of maxing out the amount we could request from TIFIA, and it's highly dependent on these revenues as is.
So all of the numbers that you have in your presentation assumes 105, not 70.
Right.
Okay.
Great.
Yep. And then that last bullet is really just probably the discipline bullet, which is we just need consistency and discipline about how we think and talk about tolls, both within your toll policy, the legal documents that we'll negotiate with TIFIA, and then public and financial market outreach. Financial market is really just rating agency, TIFIA in this case, but the public outreach. And then all of that has to sync up with however that investment grade traffic and revenue study shakes out. So that's really a big point.
Drawn on the bridge.
CDM Smith,
Are there any other considerations that are in sort of in flux other than the TNR study in getting from indicative to the final?
yeah, that's a good question. Rating agencies were very much focused on construction and construction delivery. And they wanted to know, you know, who was the contractor that you all selected. We said it was Kiewit, subsidiary of Kiewit West. That's a good thing. That resonated because they will look at the financial wherewithal. Everything from a rating agency lender perspective cuts to the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And so they're like, what happens if your contractor goes under? They say, okay, it's Kiewit. Yeah, feels good. And then they'll look at then they'll look at the entire security package when that comes in. So they'll look at liquidated damages and they'll look at supportive features that could help any sort of disruption in construction. So they realize that the new revenue stream only fits in with the new bridge. And so they'll focus on what could slow or hinder the delivery of the bridge. And so that's going to be we had a discussion with them on a preliminary basis about where we are and how progressive design build works and what Kiewit's going to come in and how they're going to validate costs, et cetera. And then they'll want it, once we go from indicative to final, they'll want the results of all that. So there's quite a bit to talk about on the construction and construction delivery. And then by that time, the investment grade TNR study. Those will be the two pieces.
It's got to help that we have an existing bridge and that we get all of the toll revenues in the future. So if the project gets delayed, it's not like there won't be any revenue.
Right. It also helps that the initial plan is you will not draw on this TIFI loan until quite late in the delivery of the bridge. And so before you draw down on this loan, most of the bridge should be constructed. And so with that comes less and less delivery risk. Yeah.
The original thought we had was that we wouldn't touch this for the new bridge. We would use it to remove the old bridge.
Right. And we've emphasized that.
And by that time, by the way, we start getting revenue in the new
revenue.
And 2 years later, this one goes away.
Yeah.
The new one would be open at that point.
Right.
In the factors that they are considering to inform that rating, was any consideration given to what our existing reserve funding is or what we're showing currently in hand in anticipation of that future repayment?
Yes. Yes, they give us a little less credit than we would like to for your sort of accumulated reserves. You're going to have to use those reserves to sock away upon closing of probably not upon closing, but upon drawing. If you close on your TIFI loan in 25, early 26, yet you don't draw until 2030, that's really when you're going to have to fund up reserves. And so much of that increment will go into those reserves. They are, when they stress us, they being the rating agencies, they look at what if you drew down on this and there was some interruption to toll revenues, how long would that increment carry us to pay debt service?
So in theory, if we were currently positioned not with 2 million, but with 10 million.
Yeah.
That could have been a factor.
Right. Yes. Or as time goes on, those reserves become more and more, I think, important to the credit story. Yeah. So good conversation here, really. Okay. We're going to walk you through the next 3 or 4 pages, the results from the planning level traffic and revenue study that CDM Smith prepared and we presented to the rating agencies. They will build on this, but it will be replaced by the investment grade traffic revenue study. So all of these numbers will change. Here's an overview of sort of major assumptions. Yeah.
So when you say that, can you clarify? I'm concerned when you say that it's not all going to change dramatically, right?
I didn't say dramatically.
That's a good point. Can you clarify change? What in your mind would give us some parameters on what that is?
If you can, you know, I will channel my inner traffic and revenue engineer. They've already begun with a robust model, and I know CDM Smith is on. I won't necessarily put him on the spot, but one, the model's been developed in a very rational manner. I think most importantly, it's probably calibrated to current traffic. So as opposed to a green field where there's nothing there and you're going to build a road and you're going to make a heavy forecast about who may come, they're really building and calibrating on who's there today. And so I think it's most helpful when we get into some of these down to look at historical growth, both on transactions and revenue, and look at how the model assumes it, and they're both quite in sync. So, I mean, to your point, I can't drill down and tell you sort of the model parameters that are going to drive change. I guess conversely, the forecast looks to be in sync with history. And so I think that's the strongest case today.
So if you go to the next slide.
Yeah.
What's, how sensitive is your model to the 2031 opening year? What happens if it's a 2029?
Yeah. What did you want?
I can kind of answer that question. I just wanted to say, because I worked a lot with CDM Smith right at the end of this study that we're looking at. There's been another year of data now of actuals that will feed into the investment grade traffic and revenue study. I mean, every month we have additional information, right? And so things will change just by the nature of the fact that your forecast now becomes an actual. And so you can go back and say, okay, you know, we were off by 2% here, and, you know, we were under a bit here and over a bit there. So things will change just through the nature of that's how it is when you get actuals. CDM Smith assumed a 30/31 opening date back when they were doing this for the Washington State Transportation Commission. So with the investment grade, we will just shift everything, but it should just kind of be a pick up and move it kind of thing, because they assumed construction would start later, that the bridge opening would be later. Everything was pushed off by a little over a year, I think, which, so when you talk about fiscal years, October of 2029 is in the 2030 fiscal year. And so they had it about a year later. They were assuming that everything would be moved about a year later. The construction would start a year later, that the opening would be a year later. So all we kind of need to do is just pick that information up and move it back. But for what Peter is showing here today, he is taking the actual traffic and revenue study and what it said and is presenting that. So that's kind of.
Yeah, I was just wondering what happens if you accelerated a year?
It does.
What's the net? What happens over on the right-hand side?
Yeah, and it shouldn't be much change, but we'll definitely get that out of the investment grade study when they do that.
So the reason I wanted to say that is I just want to make sure we're leaving people with realistic of what it means, because this area, they're not predicting huge traffic volume, right? So when you look at change and you look at revenue, a couple of things that change that, right? You get a huge influx of traffic, or you do a huge change in your revenues or your costs, right? We're not going to see a huge change in traffic, right? They're projecting a 1% or whatever the numbers, but just keep in mind when he says change, it's relative to what might change in this area, which is very small. So that's important.
Yeah, but where it comes into play, I think, is if you accelerate the end date, you start generating revenue earlier.
Not generating, already generating that revenue in 2026.
It's just an incremental change, not a.
But I don't think you took into consideration the 2026 and beyond. That wasn't in place when this was done.
We will have to let it play out, but I think the shift up 2 years will just start all the costs and the revenue starting. And so it shouldn't change the nature of the results. Shouldn't change the loan capacity, shouldn't change the nature of the results.
And these account for in 26, these full amounts coming into the Bridge Authority?
Yes.
Or a greater amount.
You've got the full increment beginning in 2024.
Yeah, and then in 26, are we shifting any of that? Like, is there a scenario or formula where we're?
They didn't know about it when the study was done. That agreement was not in place.
So the next study, though, will account for that calculation in when the port comes off of the bridge tolls. Are we shifting the percentage split?
No, because that money may be needed for the
Right.
existing bridge.
So
We
it's
will
gonna
not
stay
know until 2029. We won't know.
An isolated.
Or until the bridge opens.
Until the bridge opens and we can shut down that old bridge, we don't know what our costs will be on that old bridge.
So quick question, I think, which is what everyone's asking, because of this assumptions that are made with the Tiffy loan that we're applying for now, and I'm not trying to change up the application, but we have questions with years and times and dates, and we know that if it extends long, it'll be more expensive. So is any of the key date and time information, toll numbers that we're bringing up, is that needed for the Tiffy loan application, or is there any sort of way that we can? I'm just wondering, I'm just, 105 is the amount we can apply for. And if we need more, are we able to then, like, I guess I'm just worried about the future group of us. Are we able to, should we use the data we have in the application, like the new updated data that we have to apply for more money? I guess, is that, because it seems as though we're all asking for like different, all we're talking about.
Trying to understand too, which is a similar thing of like, how do we land with this toll escalation?
Yeah, let's put all the pieces of the puzzle together
Right.
and then, yeah.
Listen to your presentation.
Yeah. That's right.
Sure, call it here. Yeah.
Fast shooting group here, but hopefully we create the framework and then your questions get answered there. Starting with, exactly, the opening year is 2031, well, CDM Smith's gonna shift that back to 2029. That, although that's easy to identify, I don't think that's gonna be a material change.
Okay.
Here, toll rates is what drives this. Two things generate revenue, right? Transactions, people on the bridge and how much they pay. We don't think the transactions, the number of travelers should change much, right? So it kind of pulls you back to the lever of toll rates. Toll rates, so upper right box, currently 175, and then upon completion, the study assumes a 225 breezeway, and those and those increase, right? Those increase, and they increase 3% every year. Okay, they increase 3% every year, implemented though every 5. So really 15% increase to that rate every 5 years.
Yeah, step function.
Step function. We'll look at that visual step function. So let that sink in for a moment. That's important. That is underlying when we say, shoot, we've already signed a $105 million loan. We got a BBB-. That already assumes these toll rate increases.
So every 5 years is that jump for the general public?
Yeah.
Which works out to less than 3% annually.
Yeah.
One way to think about it, or, to look at it, in 2051, the breeze by rate will be $3.95. That's an inflated term. That's what it would be. So it sounds like, shoot, it's going up 15% every 5 years. I don't want to diminish that, but I will say in 2051, that's $3.95 one way. So that is, again, what drives revenue and what could increase capacity, travelers and rates. And that's the baseline rate assumption in CDM Smith's numbers right now.
You just suck the air out of the room, man.
So that landing at 15% was about going backwards with the worst case scenario of paying back that full amount and meeting all of the formula requirements. I guess that's what I'm trying to look for is clarity, because in some ways I could see that being policy, but I'm interpreting it that it's not a policy. It is that 15% is the lowest amount of a rider every 5 years for increase. And how did we land on that? Or is this an arbitrary?
There's going to be a contract which is going to obligate us to charge whatever toll is necessary to pay off.
But so where in all of that was it determined that that is a 15% increase that is needed versus
That was
10% every 5 years? Or
That was actually a
20%.
choice that the bi-state working group made, because this is how we, I don't know if you recall.
In that preliminary study,
Exactly.
when we issued a recommendation for the incremental increase of 23.
Exactly.
I don't think that there's a recollection shared that moment in time, we were memorializing that 15% is the number. And now we're saying that is what occurred.
No, the way I remember it, the working group provided this as input into this whole study at that time. We also said that at some future point in time, when this group got developed, we're gonna visit it again, and we have the right to set whatever toll we want to set.
I guess that's where I'm going with this, or do we?
So
Like, how much of this?
well, if I may, as the chair and chairman's prerogative, it's 3:51. We have a 4 o'clock meeting we have to be on time for. So we're gonna have to, and he's got more slides, and hopefully he'll be able to wrap it up. And then after we get done, we can ask some questions. And I'm sorry, I should have made sure that you could do the whole thing, and then we could ask questions.
That's okay. That's okay.
I understand where you're going here.
We can ask questions in the special meeting.
No,
We're ending promptly at 4.
We can
Open a different
recess. We
meeting.
can recess and we can resume, right?
yeah, we can recess and resume if we have to.
Or, I mean, to me, this is something, are you joining our prep call tomorrow? I think this is something that we just need to fine tune how we're talking about it and where we are with what decisions here are firm versus what is still being.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You're like, hey, we would like decision-making authority over rates. And then part of the response to that is from a financial perspective, there's a budgetary limitation, if you will, right? If you need 105 million, these are the rates you need.
Thank you. I think that is the lane and starting there, but we can talk about that tomorrow.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so, yep, yeah, finance is useful in that it creates a sort of for black and white structure. And if you need 105, this is what you kind of have to do it. And then there's some nuance beyond that. 3% increases every 5 years. It gets you to $3.95 by 2051. The transactions grow. We'll look at the compound annual growth rate here, which is a little bit. Know how to make that go away, so I'm gonna have to read them.
Billy, can you get rid of that?
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, so the historical growth in terms of transactions, let's go back to 2010 through 23, 1.5%. That does pick up the pandemic.
Explain what.
Yeah, it's the annual growth rate, compounded annual growth rate. So you could just think annual growth rate for these purposes. And so from 2010 to 2023, transactions, people crossing the bridge, using the bridge grew at an annual rate of 1.5% over that 13-year period. Really, the long-term forecast from 2031 through the following 30 years has it at 1.2%. So, okay, feel pretty good about growth. And is it conservative? To be discussed through the investment grade study, but that was the assumption in the traffic and the initial report for the planning level. The revenue forecast is really driven by rates, so those two won't compare as closely. The historical growth from 2010, the annual growth rate grew at about 6.3% from 2010 to 2023. Even with these inflationary sort of increases implemented every 5 years, 31 through 61 has an annual growth rate at 3.7%. So I would suggest that's sort of over and above inflation, but not overwhelmingly over and above inflation.
Yeah, when you look at the history, you got to realize that the Port Commission artificially held down toll rates for years on this project.
And, I understand that's a policy. So that is how revenue is expected to grow according to that planning level forecast. That's what we take. We take that and structure a loan around that. The first thing we do is how can you use the toll revenues? And this will be legally determined within the TIFIA agreement. Gross toll revenues come in, there is some leakage. Your first expense will be O&M expenses. Then we have net revenue. Net revenues is what we'll pledge that we pay the TIFIA loan. So O&M gets paid off the top. Got to keep the bridge opening and operating. Net revenues is used. So whenever we talk about coverage, it's always not looking at gross revenue, it's looking at net revenue. We pay principal and interest on the Tiffy loan after O&M. And then we have to fund up the O&M reserve, the renewal and replacement reserve. There'll be a general project reserve, which sort of captures unidentified, liquidity for the benefit of the bridge. I mean, to Mark's earlier discussion, this is a single purpose entity, so the dollars can only go for one thing. So it's going to stay at the bridge. The legal documents will define that. Tiffy will focus on these toll revenues to make sure it'll flow through this waterfall and it can pay everything, and the rating agencies as well. We touched on the financing assumptions. We do assume that this opens in 2029. So we have brought forward the revenues as well as the start date of costs. Interest rate, we could do an interest rate sensitivity and see how much more capacity you get for every 50 basis point change or so. This is a 34-year repayment period.
You've already assumed increase over time, right?
In terms of the interest rate?
By the time we sign in the loan, it could be a 30 point higher.
Yeah. And, forecasts assume it's going down, so that's a fairly conservative assumption. U.S. Treasury rates. Here's your net revenue. I think it is. Your net revenue over our principal and interest repayment, right? So that looks pretty good. It's a little tight up front. So there's your net revenue, there's the TIFIA debt service, and that's what we call debt service coverage to the right, that simple ratio. And we need that ratio to average 1.7 times after they test it. They being the rating agency, so they stress test it. They look how low we are in the front end, but we got some pretty good capacity at the back end, and they'll take the average of that 34 years, and they'd like that to be 1.7 times to get us to the BBB minus. So that's pretty much right where we hit. This is probably more meaningful, and I realize it's a lot of numbers, but that's all good. Let's take 2040 as the point, right? 2040, if based on start date of 29, you increase tolls 15% every 5 years. The revenue that would come in 2040 is 16.2 million. First, we pay O&M expenses, that's 5.5 million. We structured this TIFIA repayment at 7 million. And then we fund up a fairly humble operating reserve. We do have to make a deposit to renewal and replacement. Engineers will tell us what that has to be. Couple takeaways. One is, if you take all of those cash flows for the first 10 years, there's $14.1 million sort of not being absorbed by an identified cost. That turns out 14 million, that's a lot of money. I get it. That's a lot of money, $14 million. That's about 10% of the forecast through that 10 years. So there's only a room for mistake by 10%.
Yeah, that's not that much.
That's not a ton.
That's not that much.
You look at 2040 as a specific year, the way we've structured the loan, we've got $728,000 left in that year, which is only 4.5%. So it's the early years of a loan that always create the challenge and always constrain us, okay? And that's why we have to live with a more robust forecast, if you will, robust forecast. You do have, what if this came to fruition? You get to 2040, you got 14.1 million that you've collected that hasn't been designated for any other purposes. You could use that to repay the TIFIA loan early. You just start paying down that TIFIA loan, just like your home mortgage, start paying it down early. Then your interest costs go down, the amount outstanding goes down. And then with that, I think punchline, with that comes the financial flexibility. If the dollars can't be warded off towards transit like other bridge and toll. It has to go somewhere. TIFIA will want it to go to them. You might want to preserve a little bit of liquidity for a rainy day fund. So that's an ongoing discussion, but you would take that 14 million and you would pay TIFIA and then pay down that loan. And then the quicker you do that, got this sort of positive cyclical loop. The quicker you pay down that loan, TIFIA loan debt service, that column continually changes and then it frees up more cash to the right. So you just continue with that quickly. The TIFIA loan is gone. You could manage rates any way that sustains the purpose of the bridge. It covers O&M costs and renewal replacement. In other words, you'll have more flexibility the quicker you sell.
You're anticipating that probably wouldn't start till 40.
Just looking at these numbers, It's a little slim for the first 10.
And again, but this is based on, we're taking out 105.
Right.
If we can squeeze ourselves down and we're taking out closer to 70, that picture changes quite a bit.
Right.
If we've been able to save some money starting in 26 on repair and replacement, there could be $10 million sitting there unused. That could help as well, start us out.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that we can do. And again, the more grants we get, the less pressure we have on the Tiffy line. Okay, it is 4 o'clock. I need a question from, there's one more slide. Are you guys good with taking a recess and then coming back to it? Is there a lot more discussion you want to have on this? How does the board feel?
Recess sounds good to me.
Yes, that's what we need to do the budget.
Yeah. Okay. Good. How long do you think this budget's gonna take?
That's a
We
good
have
question,
to-
but I would think not long.
We have to close this meeting down and resume, right?
And I think you,
Okay, so say 30 minutes, 20 minutes? Meeting.
Yeah, 30. Well, it's scheduled for 30.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to recess for 30 minutes.
So
I
So
can
move.
do it, can't I? Or,
Yeah, yeah.
all right, we're recessing for 30 minutes. We'll be back at 4:30. We're gonna shut the recording down. We are moving into the budget committee. If everybody has the link to that, if you want to open that up.
And do we have our budget committee members?
I stayed working group.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we will be coming back on.
Yeah, like I just, I feel like that is off the table.